And she said, I have to tell you something. And I said, okay. She said, are you listening to me? I said, yeah. She says, your daughter is dead. She says, your husband is dead. She says, your son's been shot in the head. And I thought, how can this happen?
It must have been surreal,
Right.
to hear that news.
Right.
You're probably on the phone saying, what?
Right. My nephew had grabbed David somehow and had began to stab him. As we're sitting here, I can imagine it, or as I'm at home, I'm thinking about it and wondering what David was going through at that time. How do you deal with that, you know?
I've been looking forward to today's program. First, you'll meet Darlene, an astonishing woman who is suffering through one of life's most devastating events, the violent murder of her husband. Now, despite her strength and faith, tragedy has driven her into a place of deep emotional pain. We are blessed today to hear her story of unimaginable loss and to allow the grace of God to minister to her right here on the program. The stats on depression are staggering. The number of people actually diagnosed with depression is rising 20% each year. 30% of teens with depression also develop a substance abuse problem. Now, if you live to be 55 years old, it's quite possible that some form of depression will affect you in still years from your life. And yet, the most staggering of all stats is that 80% of people suffering from the symptoms of clinical depression are not receiving any treatment at all. Why? Fear, shame, and embarrassment. Well, that stops now. So stay right where you are. Today, we're coming into your world.
Changing one life, time after time. Oh Lord, we do it all for you.
Through the trials I see, I'll always believe a new life starts with you.
Oh, change your world today. Change is gonna come your way. Change and get an understanding. His grace will transform you.
Darlene Quincy is a mother of two, a daughter, a sister, and a faithful church member. And yet, in an instant, she became a widow. Darlene is seeking peace despite the despair. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Darlene Quincy. Let's step into this. You're a believer.
Yes.
You are a singer, a psalmist,
Yeah.
and you have strong faith in God.
My faith has been strong. It's tough during situations like this,
Sure.
but because I am a believer, I trust God in all things.
And yet, as a believer, this situation happens.
Right.
Horrific.
Yes.
Walk us through the events of March 2014 as they happened.
My nephew was just not behaving correctly. He had moved here from Texas. My sister had passed away a few years back. And then he was left sort of not alone because he lived with his stepfather. But my mom felt a need to have him here with David and myself. I knew that he had some mental challenges over the years that I talked to my sister about, getting him some help.
So David had accepted responsibility to be somewhat of a mentor to
Right.
him, a father figure to
Right.
him.
And we had a lot of work that we had to do with him, but we got him to a place where he was doing much better in school, and so.
So talk about the events. David is now over to the house. He's getting ready to talk to him, and
Right.
What happened?
From what my mom tells me, she heard some scuffling in the back room, and she walks into the room wondering what's going on. And my nephew had grabbed David somehow and had began to stab him. And I was just kind of shocked because she called me and frantic, just screaming, saying that Mustafa was stabbing David. And at the moment in time, you're hearing something like that, but you certainly don't think that a child that's 17 years old would actually do something like that. Not the person that I know as my nephew, my sister's son, would ever do that. I could see him acting out because my mom had said that he had seemed very different that day.
You could not have fathomed that.
None of that.
It would have gotten to that point.
Right.
And so feeling somewhat frozen, it must have been surreal.
Right.
To hear that news.
Right.
You're probably on the phone saying, what?
Right. Yeah.
He's in jail now, right?
Right. He is.
Have you been to visit him?
I have not, and I don't know if I could actually face and see him. I know that I'll see him at some point in the trial or when that comes up. Regardless of whether you're Christian or not, you immediately say to yourself, I want the same thing to happen to that person. I want harm done to that person. They get what they get, and too bad for them. But if the other part of me says, because I am a Christian and because of who I am in God, I've asked for God to send forth the man of God that's in that jail or that prison and come and minister to him, that angels sit at his feet and protect him, that no hurt, harm, or danger will come to him, ever. Even though he's taken away the most precious thing for my children.
Yeah.
I've got a 10-year-old son who admired his father,
Yeah.
and then I've got a daughter who loved her daddy.
What are the discussions like with them, explaining to them what happened to their father?
My daughter was wide awake. She could see the ambulance and the tape being roped off of the house. And how do you tell a child, an 8-year-old girl who loved her daddy, who just saw him the day before, daddy's gone. Do you understand what I'm saying? Your daddy's no longer coming back. Those discussions are hard for anyone to have for a child. It's hard for an adult to have to, kind of reconcile that in their mind.
Oh, sure.
I always talk about, daddy loves you, daddy's watching over you, he cares for you, he's always thinking about you. But just to have the conversation of that hurt, within them.
Sure.
I make sure that they know that I love them.
Yeah.
That I'm here.
Yeah. And you can't help but to wonder the emotional disposition of your children and even things that you're going through with your emotions. How have you been doing emotionally? And, we want to talk about, what depression is.
Right.
And really before this is over with, to talk about how to get out of it. Explain to us your experiences and even the kids going through this emotionally.
Right. And it's certainly probably depression. Constantly, as we're sitting here, I can imagine it, or as I'm at home, I'm thinking about it. I'm driving in the car, and I can hear it and see it, and wondering what David was going through at that time. How do you deal with that?
How to handle depression. To put it very basic and make it very simple so that we can understand what depression is, it's external pressures entering into your heart, weighing you down. It's when you take stress and pressure and internalize it. And it gets in through thinking thoughts that weigh you down. And when you start thinking thoughts that weigh you down, then all of those external pressures enter in through your thinking. So how do you deal with that? If you're going to deal with how you feel, and depression is a feeling, it's an emotion. If you're going to deal with how you feel, you're going to have to deal with what you're thinking. You're going to have to challenge the way that you begin to think about things. And when those thoughts show up, then I immediately introduce thoughts from the Word of God, thoughts from the grace of God, and those thoughts come in and capture those external things that will cause pressure on me. Now, the important thing I want people to really get out of this is real.
Absolutely.
And so I don't by any means expect to come to you and say, well, you're a Christian, you have strong faith in God, you shouldn't be going through that. Right. Those are things that have happened that will allow those thoughts to come. It's how we deal with those thoughts and the way we deal with those thoughts. I mean, just think about it. When I think about, steps out of depression. I think about number one, let not your heart be troubled. I've got to develop a strategy to not allow trouble to come into my heart and weigh me down. Number two, I've got to make sure that I'm speaking to the mountain and not just about the mountain. Because the more I talk about it, it's in a sense meditating more on those thoughts that are weighing me down instead of speaking to that mountain, speaking to those thoughts. It's an opportunity to go before God and say, Lord, I don't have peace in this area. Give me peace. I receive what grace has for me and help me, Lord. And sometimes prayer can be so simple as, I need help today, Lord. Finally, you begin to understand the power of praise. Praise rebukes depression.
You know, Pastor, most people will look at me and they say that, you know, Darlene, you're so strong, right? You look like you got it all together. But the reality is that, you know, what people see on the outside is one thing. In my quiet time, nobody knows what's going on. The kids went out to dinner on Sunday, and Paige looked at me and she said, Mom, are you okay? And this is an 8-year-old. She said, Mom, are you okay? And I said, you know, Paige, I'm not okay right now.
And that's okay not to be okay sometimes. But that's what the grace of God is all about.
Yeah.
It's not you qualifying or performing and doing all of the right things in order to deserve God's comfort.
Yeah.
It's going before God and saying, I'm not okay. And I need your help today, Lord.
Yeah.
God, I'm feeling some kind of way today different than I was yesterday. And I need your help today, Lord. The grace of God is always going to be much more than your present circumstance and situation. And I can tell you this, if we ever want to ask, how do you measure God's grace? It's always going to be more than enough. There will always be an abundance of grace that's going to be more than what you're going through.
Yeah.
But it doesn't erase that you have some good days, you have some bad days. But what it does, it says, my grace is more than enough for where you are today. And that's the thing that I'm so excited about. And truly, the strength that people see in you, Darlene, is really the strength of God that God gave you for that day and for that time. And you're amazing to me still. I often look at people and I would like to think that I could receive that grace to help me to stand strong in situations. But I also know that when you love somebody the way you love David, the shock of what happened and the daily confrontation of what if. And
I just need to know that God loves me. My pastors are there for me. I've got praise and worship. If praise is taken away from me, I don't have anything.
Wow.
That's all I have. That's all I know.
All of your life, this is something that you'll carry.
Yes, it will be.
But the grace of God will give you the necessary strength to go through it all. And we love you, and we appreciate you. Thank you for telling this story today.
He's live,
God getting ready to turn some things around in your life.
sometimes direct,
How many believers do I have in here right now?
and always anointed. Creflo Dollar, streaming live from Atlanta and New York City, Saturdays at 6 p.m., Sundays at 10 a.m., and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Stay connected, no matter where you are in the world. Creflo Dollar's just a click away. Catch him live 3 times a week at CrefloDollarMinistries.org.
Nikki, thank you so much for joining us today on Your World. Let's get right into your story. Now, I know for me hearing this, I'm having some issues going on with me right now. I know our audience hearing this, they're thinking, for real, did that really happen? Is that a movie? Are you serious that happened? Walk us through the events of this day.
My husband, he had been out of town, and when he came back, he just wasn't himself. It was him, but he looked different. His eyes were different, and his voice was different. And he said, he don't want to do this. And I said, who is he? And he said, you need to leave. And I said, are you serious? And then he pulled out a gun and he pointed it at me, right in my face. And I just took off running through the front door. And I ended up in the woods. And I called 911. I said, something's wrong with my husband. And I told them what was going on. They said, where are you? I said, I don't know, I'm in the woods. And so I kind of described the way I ran. And so the lady says, well, the officers are pulling up. She said, I need you to crawl out so that they can see you. And so when the officers came, I blacked out. And when I woke up, I was in front of my house. I saw the SWAT team. I saw all these officers, and they were screaming. And the radios were going off. And I'm thinking, what's wrong? What's going on? And then the officer came, and she said, I have to tell you something. And I said, okay. She said, are you listening to me? I said, yeah. She says, your daughter is dead. She says, your husband is dead. She says, your son's been shot in the head, and he's on his way to the hospital in that helicopter. And I thought, how can this happen? And I go to the hospital. And I said, I had such hope. And she said, there's nothing we can do for your son. He's on life support. And we just left him alive until you got here. So I said, what do I do? I wanted to pray, but I was mad at God. I was mad. I said, if there is a God, how can you let this happen to children?
How can you let this happen? And Darlene, the same question came up, how can you let this happen? Yeah. So we're talking about a murder-suicide, where he killed the kids and then turned the gun on himself. Yeah. And he killed himself. And so this is a day that you could have never imagined happening to you. So do you find yourself, I think you described your guilt as a survival's guilt.
I shouldn't have left him. Mm-hmm. It was, well, why didn't he kill me too? Mm-hmm. And it was, did he leave me alive to make me suffer? Mm-hmm. What could I have done this bad?
Yeah. The guilt of the fact that I'm alive and everybody else is dead.
Right.
I'm mad at God right now because I'm trying to figure out how can you let this happen. This is that human side we were talking about with Darlene. And external pressure, things going on in your head, questions going on in your head, and you've got to turn to something. And right now it's not God because you're trying to figure that out. No. What did you turn to try to help ease the pain?
When it first happened, I went to the mental institute, and the nurse said, take these pills. And I took them, and I felt so much better. And when I left, they said, take 3 a day. Mm-hmm. Then I took 5 a day. Mm-hmm. And then I took 7 a day. And then when the pills would run out, because they only give you so much, somebody said, drink this, girl. I said, well, I don't drink. Oh, it's okay. Just drink it. So half of the day, I was on pills. The other half, I was on alcohol.
You were searching for relief.
Yeah.
This is painful. This hurts. I can't figure this out.
Right.
Almost like you're drowning.
Yeah.
And the only relief you could find was with the pills and the alcohol.
Right.
And there was something that changed everything for you. What was that?
And so my mom calls me one night. She said, I miss you. I said, oh yeah, I know. She said, I want you to come see me. I said, oh, I'll be over there tomorrow. So I get up the next day because I was so high. I get up the next day. I go to my mom's house. I said, Mom, you want something to drink? She doesn't say anything. I get a Coca-Cola. I go back in her room. I sit down. I said, hey, Mama. She's dead.
Wow.
She's cold.
Wow.
But it saved me.
Now, how is that? How did that save you?
It was reality. It was, this can be you. It's, your brothers and your sisters could find you just like this. It was, Nikki, get yourself together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like my mom, she died to save me.
Wow. It
And
woke you up in a sense?
It woke me up. It's like I stopped living when my kids died. And I couldn't think of any new things I had did since my kids died. And I said, Nikki, you got to get it together.
Which is the key to walking out of depression.
Sometimes I have to pray to get to the end of the week. Sometimes I have to pray to get to the end of the hour. Sometimes I have to say, God, just let me get to the next minute. And it's hard, but I know that as long as I keep my mind on what my purpose is, that I'm gonna make it. But I have to remind myself of that constantly.
Millions of people experience depression because, like I said, they take those external things, the stress of life, and nobody can question the stress that both of you had to deal with and have to look at and deal with periodically in your life as you go on.
I've made some bad decisions, but I can turn it around. And whether I'm tattooed or torn or broke, have money, God still loves me.
Wow, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. These are good keys of how to come out of this situation. Darlene, what about you?
The enemy, when it's quiet, is repeating the same stuff in my head, and I hear it, and I see the stabbing, or I see the whatever he wants me to see. So what I do is I pop in a CD, whether it's the word or whether it's the music or whether it's something motivational. I have to keep myself sort of motivated. But when that enemy still is coming in my ear, I do open up my mouth. I sing. I buy the CDs. I'm playing something so that it replaces that which is in my head with something else.
You both have done an excellent job of describing what you have to do in order to make sure that depression doesn't just lay grip of your life. What you're exposed to, the words you hear, what you're exposed to will determine the way you think. And the way you think will determine how you feel. And of course, depression is a feeling. We just thank God that we have the grace of God and His Word so that we have something we can go and think about. And when we start thinking about the goodness of God, and we start thinking about His Word, and we start thinking about His promises, and we start thinking about the things that help us get our thinking in line with something that's going to cause us to be healthy, we feel differently. And then when we feel differently, we'll make different decisions. And when we make different decisions, we'll get involved in better actions. And we'll find ourselves at a destination in life that we want. Now, it's nothing that I am saying will fix you forever, but I am saying that when those feelings show up, know that you have to deal with the way you think. And when you deal with the way you think, if you change what you're thinking about, you'll change how you feel. And that's what I hear from both of you. You've decided to go forward. I want to thank you ladies so much for your story.
Thank you.
Thank you for your courage. Thank you for being a demonstration of the grace of God operating in and upon your life. You know, you never know what others in your world are facing. The person sitting next to you on the train could have just that day buried their husband or wife. The woman who takes your order at the restaurant could have recently suffered a miscarriage. The man who fixed your car, might be on the verge of losing his home. There is no denying that pain and loss are all around us. But this reality isn't the only reality. If you or someone you love is suffering with depression or experiencing hardship, you're not alone. There's hope, and there is still more life to be lived. That's the promise we have by the grace of God.
There's an enemy hidden in our homes, in our hearts, and in our minds. It's abusive, it's murderous, and it's strong. It's called depression. And without the right weapons to fight this terrorist who has stolen the life and joy from so many, thousands more will follow. Are you one of its victims? The time has come to declare victory over this enemy once and for all. You are not alone in your suffering, and a power that's stronger, smarter, and eternal is available to you right now. A power that will give you the peace you've been seeking.
Sometimes I have to pray to get to the end of the week. Sometimes I have to say, God, just let me get to the next minute. But I know that as long as I keep my mind on what my purpose is, that I'm gonna make it. But I have to remind myself of that constantly.
Are you prepared for the joy that belongs to you in Christ? Are you ready to take hold of the peace that's waiting for you? Creflo Dollar has the key to getting you started on this exciting new journey, the key that will unlock the door to healing, forgiveness, hope, and victory. Take your first step towards finally defeating the enemies of depression and hopelessness when you call to receive Creflo Dollar's course entitled Overcoming Stress, Depression, and Fear. This course includes 4 hours of teaching from Creflo Dollar on your choice of DVD or CD that will empower you to defeat life's strategies to bring you down. The course also includes the best-selling book, Overcoming Fear. Through the pages of this book, you will discover candid and revealing insights into the tactics of fear that are designed to destroy your life on every level. Together, these resources create a powerful 1-2 punch that will break the cycles of depression, stress, and fear in your world forever. This entire collection is yours today for your gift of $55. That's Creflo Dollar's Overcoming Stress, Depression, and Fear Life Course, including the 4-disc series on your choice of DVD or CD, and the best-selling book, Overcoming Fear, for just $55. But that's not all. You will also receive the exclusive never-before-seen studio Q&A session with Creflo Dollar as he speaks to the topic of depression head-on. In this behind-the-scenes conversation, you'll hear the answers to life's most painful questions and gain the knowledge you need to understand the triggers for depression and how to overcome them.
Earlier, you mentioned that you were angry at God. I want to know what prompted you back to God.
Call now or visit us online to get these resources now. Depression, stress, and fear are powerful enemies, but you have a weapon they don't. Defeat them and your world will finally be filled with joy and peace.
We thank the partners and friends of Creflo Dollar Ministries for making this program possible.